to The Two Marks, exclusively on the Pod Station.
Welcome, listeners, to a new show brought to you by The Two Marks. This time we're discussing The Mandalorian, Season 1. Let me just get my Casio keyboard. And once again, The Two Marks are delivering an irreverent review, providing you lively debate, conversation, and social commentary. Will we have fans blagging all over the place? What has Apollo Creed been doing since he was knocked out by Rocky? With a multi-million-pound budget, what can be done with an ice cream maker? What is this strange green bogey wrapped in a Hot Pocket playing with silver balls? Will Pedro Pascal have his eyes pushed out by the mountain? Oh, hang on. Wrong show. This is the way. All this and more will be unpacked in this week's episode. Let me introduce my friend and co-host, Mr. Mark Pollard.
Oh, I tried to keep a straight face during that, but I failed miserably. And I thought I was going to do one of those, those snot laughs when you try desperately not to make a noise and you end up just blowing bogies all over the place. So I had to let it out in the end.
I had a snigger.
It's dead weird because I can't see you because your camera's broken. I'm talking to just a blank screen, which is vaguely similar to talking to your blank face, but not quite as weird. It's weird. I can't gauge your reaction to what it is I'm saying, which unnerves me more than I expected.
I like it.
So we're getting stuck into some Star Wars this time, aren't we?
We are. It's a bit overdue. I'm sure there's lots to unpack. How have you been?
I'm fine. I've obviously been carefully detailing my notes on Season 1, which I haven't watched for about 3 months. So I've watched a YouTube quick recap video.
I love the effort you put into these.
I've noted down as many keywords relating to The Mandalorian as popped into my head. And yeah, I settled for that because I only started about 15 minutes before I was due to jump on this. So that's all I had time for.
For people new to the show, do you want to explain your usual historical effort you put into them?
Well, the short answer is I just don't do notes. I just wing it. As opposed to you who writes War and Peace on some of the most minutiae of detail, which is commendable. I don't by any stretch take the mickey out of your efforts because it's just something that I'm far too lazy to do myself. But there we go.
Something additional to the show, isn't there?
Well, there is. You see, we've got a guest who's joining us for The Mandalorian. He's a big Star Wars nerd. It's always nice to have a nerd on the show. We've invited him along to throw his 2 pennies worth into the hat. I'll be interested to know which side of the line he falls on when it comes to note taking. For the purpose of this show, we should really call you Mark, but it's not. It's Dave, which right Riley bollocks is up the title. So Dave, how are you doing, mate?
I'm okay, Mark. Hello, The Two Marks. Good to be on. It's a privilege. And can I just say, yeah, I fall down on the Mark Pollard side. Take notes.
Am I carrying the show?
But really, really worried.
We're going to test the strength of your back, Mark, to see how well you can carry the two of us on this.
Well, the interesting thing is we often bring up our friend Dave. Here he is. He exists. Although when we speak of him, he's not working for Starfleet. Here's a test of character. Here's to see if you are a true Star Wars fan. Let me ask you this, Dave. Who shot first?
I don't know that one.
I have no idea what you're talking about there.
What are you talking about?
My word, Han Solo and Greedo in the cantina. Who shot first?
At this point, I should jump in then and say, if you do want to throw any abuse at us, if you do want to correct us on our gaping holes in our knowledge, and just to preface that with the fact that I love Star Wars, but I wouldn't by any stretch consider myself to be a well-educated Star Wars fan. A lot of what I say is likely to be wrong, likely to be badly interpreted, and very much susceptible to criticism. So if you want to throw that at me, come and get me. It's at The Two Marks on Instagram, Facebook, and of course the peace and harmonious place that is Twitter. You can send an email if you really want to go to town and start writing a War and Peace. Send an email to The Two Marks at thepodstation.co.uk. If it's too vile, do you know what? I'll just delete it. If it's wrong, well, the beauty of having a show, Mark, is I guess we can just humiliate them in return if they throw too much.
Forget, they might have a keyboard to sit behind. We control the airwaves on our own platform. It's a lovely segue. Tell us how they can listen to us.
Oh, on all of the major podcast platforms. You can go to thepodstation.co.uk and you'll find the Two Marks tab. If you go there, there's all the platforms. So we're on all of the major ones, but there's quick, easy links. Or you can just type in the Two Marks into the search field on the platform you use and you should find us there. Although one assumes if you're listening to this, you've kind of already found us, in which case I'm teaching you to suck eggs, which, let's keep the levels up, shall we?
where do you want to begin with this?
Well, I suppose we should ask Dave about his Star Wars credentials, having now humiliated both of us with our lack of knowledge about Han Solo's shooting first thing. Dave, where do you sit on the Star Wars enthusiasm spectrum?
Probably, again, fall down on your side, but I don't know that much, really. I just like watching it.
Dave's a kindred spirit here, Mark. I think. Are you a Star Wars nerd, Mark?
I would say my nerdiness isn't as much as it is for Marvel and Star Trek. I know more about it as I've got older. As you know, I followed Star Trek. I think when you were younger, your parents would buy you collectibles. Well, I call them collectibles. People say toys. Let's be honest, they're collectibles.
Yeah, you were that kid that never took them out of the box.
In my house, I have over 200 in the box figurines of Star Trek.
Is your house in a box?
It is, in a cardboard box. Because I'm homeless. No, I'm not homeless, but we do need your money, so get on the Patreon and give us some.
Yeah, patreon.com/the pod station. Just give us some money.
I've got your kids.
You see, I never got this whole Star Trek versus Star Wars. You see, I was more into Star Trek, but that was because it was a TV series that you could watch on a really regular basis, whereas Star Wars was just more sporadic films because they were that spread out. Unless you're going to watch the same films over and over and over and over again. As much as I love Star Wars, there wasn't that constant heroine-style injection of it, was there, Dave?
No, yeah, you watched it every Christmas, didn't you? Because that's all that was on. You know, I suppose it didn't really become a cult thing till later on, did it? When they started pushing it out. I was definitely on the Star Wars side of the fence. Like you say, the Star Trek TV series was the thing, but then when that stopped, we weren't really into that then, were you? Then obviously it came back with all the film, but I was on the Star Wars side, not being a nerd, but just liked it.
Now, the films came out in the 80s, so where were you sitting age-wise to these films?
I was tired. Yeah, I'd already retired at that point. Well, I was 7 in 77 when the first one came out.
Right.
Couldn't afford to go to the pictures, but my brother went.
I told you how great it was.
By 1981, I still couldn't afford to go to the pictures. So he come back and told me how great Empire Strikes Back was. So that was my sort of introduction into Star Wars. What my brother could remember what it had been.
And how good was your brother at describing the show?
Very good, actually, because I was waiting for him to come home on the Empire Strikes Back, and we had bunk beds, so we were very poor because two of us were sleeping in the same room. So he come home, and when he told me he was his father, I was quite shocked, really. I don't think I slept that night.
I think we need some violin music over this bit, Mark. It looks like he's going for one of them segments on, the X Factor where you're building it up to be, go for that side of the story.
You're through to the final, Dave. I mean, he didn't tell you properly because he didn't tell you who shot first.
No, he didn't tell me that bit.
You need to get on the phone to him now.
I'll ring him because he probably still doesn't know.
No, I mean, it is a debate within the fandom of Star Wars. George Lucas edited it. Interestingly, Mark brought up we got tied up into Star Trek. The reason why Star Trek was the go-to is because it only had the 3 movies. Nobody includes Christmas Special and the Ewoks unless you were, interested in Endor,
furry things. Small furry things. If that's your bag, hey, we don't judge.
Well, we had tribbles, didn't we? So that was the equivalent of a tribble.
And then he invented a cream and it all went away.
Yeah. Star Trek was always a staple of TV or movie viewing, whereas Star Wars, till Disney decided to purchase the behemoth of what it is now. And interestingly, a little known fact, when George Lucas sold his company for whatever billion it was, he actually got half of his money in cash. Well, obviously in the bank, not cash, got a lot of money to carry around California.
That's a big sock you're going to have to find to put that in.
But he got the rest in shares, and so his shares are now worth far more. He got like over 1 million shares.
And what about the prequels, Dave? How did you feel about the prequels?
Well, I think the thing is, the reason it sort of like started, because they came out when your kids were of that age then. So they were very clever. They knew everyone in the 70s would be having kids about that time, and then they would be of an age where they get into it. Yeah, it didn't do it. The kids loved them, and they brought a few computer games out and stuff like that, didn't they? But when you look back at them, they're not great. And they're not the ones you go back and watch.
I've got 2 memories from Star Wars. One was in my primary school. Every holiday before we broke up, we would watch Star Wars A New Hope. And I actually wasn't allowed to go to the toilet. So I wet myself watching Star Wars A New Hope. So technically, I'm actually scarred for life psychologically. Yeah. And then the second one was when I went to see Phantom Menace. When you see the crawl come up and go, and it's got that wonderful music.
You wet yourself.
Right, yeah.
I wet myself again, just to be fair. But that's the end of it. Because it was so crap. I shat myself just on a doctor test. But no, everyone was cheering at the beginning. Everybody walked out quietly at the end.
Yeah, and thought, what the hell was that all about?
Jar Jar Binks, what are we on with
You
that?
see, I didn't mind the prequels when I first watched them. I thought they were all right. I'm not quite as offended by them as everyone else. When you look back at some of the script writing and a little bit of the acting, it does make you cringe a touch. They're not as good as the originals, and they're obviously not as good as the latest batch of Star Wars stuff. But do you know what? If someone sat me down and forced me to watch it, I wouldn't be offended.
But I think what they tried to do was they just tried to appeal to kids too much, which the original ones didn't do. They were for everybody. Like you say, Mark, Jar Jar Binks, what was that all about?
No idea.
I don't know what the hell.
It was just too much CGI as well.
Yeah, too much. And
the new films now, as the series we're about to discuss, have taken on, particularly when J.J. Abrams got involved, he went back to the drawing board. He actually brought back stop animation for the chessboard that was used in A New Hope, and he actually went back to using practical effects, which I love. I think you can never have too many practical effects.
No.
Frank Oz, Jim Henderson Workshop, you can't go wrong with them because there's an authenticity, the uncanny valley. So you know it's not real, but it's actually more real than watching CGI when you know it's not real.
Because it could be, couldn't it?
Exactly. But that's what ruined it for me. It was literally just green screen.
And I think what they tried to do as well, they tried to explain too much of it.
Oh, them bloody midichlorians
and
friggin' no, it felt like you were sitting in a chemistry lesson, wasn't it?
We know what
it's magic. It's like them supermarket doors that just open for you when you wave your hands at them. It's just magic.
Don't want to know how it happens.
No, well, that's when you start telling people the secret sauce. Midichlorians, I thought you got that when you got swimming, you had to get PPI.
You've nicely brought us, segued us into the show that we're going to talk about today, because that's a bit of a trip down memory lane. What we actually want to talk about is The Mandalorian, and we're going to just focus on season 1 for this episode. The plan is when season 3 comes out, we'll do an episode by episode blow, but quite frankly, we couldn't be arsed doing a blow by blow for season 1 as much as, I was just about to say as much as we may have enjoyed it, but that would have been a spoiler. Before we get stuck into The Mandalorian, did either of you know anything about The Mandalorian before we got stuck into this?
No, I knew. I didn't. But again, I'm on your side of the fence. We don't know much.
Well, I mean, that's presumptuous of you, Dave, to think that I didn't know. No, you're absolutely right. I had no idea what the fuck a Mandalorian was.
I didn't even know it was coming on till lockdown, and then I thought, what's this all about?
Really?
Yeah, I hadn't seen anything about it. It didn't seem to have been put out there that much. And then all of a sudden it's on, and we went for it.
And I suppose for me, when it came out, it didn't make me immediately want to rush out and get Disney Plus, which I suppose shows my levels of enthusiasm. But what about you, Latham? Did you know? I'm sure you did.
First thing people think of is Boba Fett, isn't it, and Django?
Yeah, but you see, people always used to mention Boba and Django. Do you know what? I didn't really know who they were, and I've never understood what the cult status was of those characters.
The thing that's retconned into this and expanded upon more, they're kind of a major military power. They sided with the Sith against the Jedi originally during the Republic Wars, but Boba Fett is a bounty hunter. Yeah. Now, obviously, what people don't realise is he's not actually Mandalorian. If you look at the prequels, as Dave quite rightly corrected, they explain too much. So you see Django Fett, who is a clone. They've explained now in this series that that's not the case. So Boba Fett just happens to have Mandalorian armor. He's a bounty hunter with their armor.
Is one of them fellas who turns up with all the golfing gear thinking he's a golfer, and actually when he steps up to the tee, just shanks it all over the show.
Basically stolen valor. He's managed to get hold of some Mandalorian armor. He's a bounty hunter. The actual Mandalorians are a caste-based system, so you have different ones do different things, and they all have the rules that they follow. Quite involved. This show takes us nicely in the period.
The Empire's been defeated, and there's now a vacuum. I mean, I must admit, when I found out that was where they were setting it, I had a bit of a Star Trek Discovery moment where, you just think, oh, stop filling in blanks, will you? Can't we just move to a part of the timeline we've not visited and do something new and different? Whereas what you're doing is you're going back to somewhere where there's loads of canon. You can be lazy in who you pull on in terms of storylines and threads and characters and the like. I don't know whether anyone else had one of those. Oh, really?
That's one of the things I enjoyed about it.
Yeah, but you're talking about having now seen the season. I'm talking about before you'd seen it. Did you have sort of of fear? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're going off over there for a bit.
Do you know, I didn't really, because again, they've only ever had 3 movies. I'm not including the Ewoks one. Any show that they did, it was Disney. Having seen the effort they put into the MCU, I was quite excited. I removed all expectation. I expected zilch. Even if it had turned up with Kathleen Kennedy wearing a smock, would have been 4 points for me. And because I didn't know as much as I do for Star Wars, but I had enough to get me by. And the only reason I know this is my mate Gareth, who's got himself a woman, gone to ground for a while.
Hi, Gareth.
Hi, Gareth. Big shout out to you. Although I did see him the other day, and
did he blank you?
I didn't recognise him. No.
Did he have a ball and chain round his ankle? He was like dragging his foot along the pavement.
Yeah, crying in his cornflakes. He popped in for a brew. Anyway, the only reason I know a bit more is because he plays SWTOR, which is an online Star Wars game. I know all about IG-11 and the IG robots and stuff like that. I know all about them.
So you've cheated, really. When you're sitting here taking the moral high ground with all your notes and looking down at me and Dave going, I know loads. Basically, you got your Star Wars mate to come round and give you all the answers to the questions.
That equates to him coming to my office every day to play on this computer while I'm working, whilst he's got headphones on and a microphone, telling all his mate to pull people off. So, and I'm only getting half a conversation. So I'm thinking to myself, what are you playing? He's going, pull him, get behind him, pull him off. So when you've got that going on and you're trying to run a business and you just let them sort of have squatters' rights, I've only picked that up vicariously because I'm like, what's this? And he's going, oh yeah, that's a such and such, and that's IG-8, and he's a bounty hunter from such and such. And it's like, all right, crack on, mate. I've got business to run here.
Should we go around the room and just give our initial thought, how we felt about season 1, just to give people a baseline of where we're going to head when we start getting stuck into a bit more nitty-gritty? Should we let Dave go first?
Yeah.
As I say, I'm having no sort of expectations of what it was like and just putting it on. I'm thinking, wow, this is good from minute one, I think. Just because, again, we talked about all the CGI and stuff, that just the way they've done it, the way it's shot and the look of it, it has original Star Wars written all over it. The characters, anything they've got in it, like it's the vehicles, it's the ships, it just has that original gritty Star Wars, I think, about it, rather than the CGI stuff and all strange ships. And just the way they just drop things in. I think you're right. We could have thought, oh, well, this is just like going back. But where those prequels, what they did do, they did go back and try and bring stuff in and explain everything. These have brought everything back, but just carried on. What that does, it just makes it so interesting because you just see stuff, you know, the original stormtroopers and all stuff like that. For me, that's what makes it so much like the first three, anything of the other stuff. It's more Rogue One, isn't it? It's what Rogue One did for it. That brought us back to where we used to be, and this has just carried it on. And you can only think going forward, this is the way it's going to be. Well, I've said it. This is the way. I threw that one. This is the way.
Very nice.
But this is the way it's going to be from now on. You're getting your Star Wars fill. Beside what you think of Mandalorians or Boba Fett and all that, you don't have to be into all that. You just get the feel of Star Wars, don't you? And then what you do, you throw a cute little kid in who isn't just a kid, is just the best character ever made. Just the best. And I've got a question. Who's his mum and dad? We need to find out who his mum and dad are. Yeah,
they're not a very good mum and dad, are they? Because one assumes they've gone, where did you put that baby? We had a baby this morning. Where's baby?
If you're talking about what I think you're talking about, he's not a baby, is he? He's 50 years old.
Well, no, he's not.
He was at some point.
49 years ago he was.
Yeah, but if he's 50 and he still looks like a baby, one assumes his mum and dad, who are like 200 years old, probably still look pretty fit.
Spoilers here, Dave.
What, mate?
Spoilers? No, well, I mean, Yoda's not his dad. He's part of the same species as Yoda. Yeah.
You're a speciesist, Dave. You just assume if it's green and it's got big ears, it's related to Yoda. Must be a Yoda, that.
Seeing as we're talking about this, it's the baby Yoda. It's not a snot and a hot pocket. It's baby Yoda. He is the same species as Yoda, and apparently he would have been round the time of Revenge of the Sith, would have been training. Possibly Anakin Skywalker might have slaughtered him, but he got away.
So he was one of the younglings.
You know.
Right.
Yeah.
You know this stuff.
What did you think, Latham?
I'm glad you asked, because one of the things...
Well, I'm glad I asked. I wanted to ask.
Let me tell you.
No, tell us.
I'm going to.
I insist.
Similar to Dave and his little brew. You two, you girls, blah. As Dave quite rightly said, this is sort of Rogue One territory, and I loved Rogue One. I loved the way that it picked up straight into A New Hope. Those films, for me, that's essentially my childhood, apart from Piss Me Pants. That was the childhood. I didn't piss my pants every day. That was just that one time when the teacher wouldn't let me go. I really love the fact that they were trailblazing, similar to stagecraft technology. They've got these display systems that they can literally produce using computer game engine, which is what I use when I'm playing games. And then all they need to do then is build practical effects within that stage. And you've got a 360 degree on both axes of your environment, and you can change that. So if you want the clouds to move, you can. I thought that was amazing. ILM have always been sort of pioneering when it comes to things, whether it was stop animation when they were moving the attack walkers. What it also did is it brought in little things that people had seen for a fraction of a minute. I mentioned the ice cream maker. Any fans will know the ice cream maker story. And in fact, the guy that was running around the corridors in Cloud City was Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Was carrying an ice cream maker, and they brought it back when they have the introduction scene to our favourite film director, Herta Wernzog. They obviously retconned it. Well, not retconned it, but they made it a thing. And in fact, the guy who was carrying the ice cream maker ended up getting his own action figure. So I just loved all of that. And they brought in the troop carrier, Empire, which was actually a toy, never been in any films, and they brought that in. Although kind of think, oh, it's going to be a bit boring because we're just going to be living in it. What they're actually doing is they're making use of the other stuff that's never been touched upon, but it is in the wider thing. Yeah.
I mean, it should be said that if you weren't aware, on Disney Plus, there is a documentary type series on this very show. They go through how each of the episodes is made and all the technology you've just mentioned there. And it's well worth watching if you haven't watched, because it is fascinating how they create some of these. You assume they go out to a desert in the middle of nowhere to film some of the stuff, and it turns out they're in a car park. Somewhere, probably in England somewhere, where it's raining outside, and they've just created this other universe. I mean, it'd be an amazing job to go to every day, just messing around with that.
Jon Favreau is a wonderful director. He's familiar with the Disney process because he's Happy Hogan in Iron Man and others. He also is a fan. You can tell, like the guy who directed Rogue One, he's a childhood fan, and you can tell it in the films. Ryan, what's his face, who did the latest one, is not a fan.
No. Well, I think you get that from the show Mark was just talking about, when they're all sat around the table and they're explaining where they got the characters from. Like you say, where they got the ice cream maker from. They're bringing all that stuff out. And when you think about it, the stuff that's there, it's just endless, isn't it, what they can bring. But they understand what we've talked about. Those prequels were very good, turned us off. So you just got that from that show, that they're all interested in it. They want to make it back to 1977, really, but with new technology.
They did go for a very sort of grungy feel.
Gritty,
so, gritty is the word I was after. Everything's got scratches and is dusty.
Well, it was like when one of the stormtroopers got hit. It was just like crap plastic. It sounded like crap plastic, but that's what it is, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Well, even the stormtrooper outfits, because in this, the Empire, or what remains of the Empire, is basically just a ragtag bunch of crooks. All the uniforms look like they've been dragged through a hedge backwards. They're all scratched. They're all dusty. Nobody looks like they're trained properly. There's no organisation to it. But that adds that element of realism, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The thing to add to that actually is, although it looked like that, the Empire is massive. Fans don't understand. They just think the Death Star contained millions of people. All I'm going to say thereby is mass murdering, just in case the rebels there are mass murderers, because all those stormtroopers were married and had families. Just saying. But basically, what people don't realise is they just think that the whole of the Empire was just shoved on one massive globe looking like a moon. And the fact is, it's massive. You don't realise until you play the games how big the Empire is. And the period you're in right now is all of the warlords that were controlling their group of stormtroopers, want for a better word. All that's happening now is they're basically vying for power. So they're basically finding all the people that they've got and saying, do you want to join my group? And they're all fragmented right now, because obviously, don't forget, it's a few years before. Is it the New Order comes? No, they were banned from the 80s.
Yeah, no, it is. Order. It lends into that, doesn't it?
So the first order, I think New Order is going to have someone doing us for copyright. The first order, the ones where it aims to be, where they've got the brand new stuff and it's all fresh. Right now, you've got warlords across the Galactic Empire.
Just finding stuff.
Yeah. And
finding stuff and putting people
we're
in
just
it.
on one planet where they've at the moment, they've got a loose hold over the planet because of what's gone on, and their flagship base of operations has gone the way of Alderaan. And, now they're all just scrambling for power, which is why we get, when we move on into this episode, the person who's now controlling all these people, who is their main boss. But above him, there's others, and there's other warlords across the Galactic Empire that are all doing exactly the same. So there's millions, billions of them, because we find out how they recruit as well, don't we? We know now the cloning stopped since the problems with Order 66.
Execute Order 66.
Have you done that on your Amazon, whatever it's called?
It's the only thing I can remember from the prequels.
Yeah. The Amazon Echo, and actually Siri, if you ask it to execute Order 66, it does something exciting.
All right, I'm going to try. Hey, Siri, execute Order 66. I don't know why I suddenly started talking American.
Oh, no.
No, it's just said I'm sorry. I think my Siri is too peaceful and people loving. It can't be my Siri if it is, but clearly it likes people.
Have you got Alexa?
That's Android, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ask Google.
I don't do Android, darling.
Let me see if I got OK Google on my shitty phone.
I don't know. Did they have it in 1985?
I need to go and speak to Robert Louis Stevenson.
Well, you need to be careful, because if we're doing these voiceover things, you might end up ordering 66 pizzas by accident.
We'll have Domino's coming to each of our houses.
Well,
but apparently, if you've got the Amazon Echo or Siri, they come back with a little witty thing in regards to that.
Mine hasn't. He hasn't even ordered me a pizza. By the way, if Domino's wants to be a sponsor of the show, the 2 marks at thepodstation.co.uk. We're very happy to meet the challenge of trying to eat our way through 66 pizzas, aren't we, boys?
Yeah, I'll help you out with that.
Do we have a well, I was just about to say what's your preference topping, but meat feast. Dave, what about you?
I'll have some chicken.
Chicken?
Well, I put chicken on the meat feast. You see, Dave, I have the full hit. I get the meat feast.
You have chicken plus, don't you?
Well, we've got 66 coming, so we just ordered one of
I was going to say, spread them out, can't you? You can have a meat one, and then you can have like individual meat ones.
We'll cut them up and swap them round them.
Not a vegetarian or pineapple. If anyone puts a pineapple on pizza, I'll punch them out.
Why? I quite like ham and pineapple pizza.
Well, it's the whole misrepresentation and under the Sales of Goods Act that when you say it's a Hawaiian, if you go to Hawaii, you won't get a pineapple on a pizza.
You won't get the pizza. No,
exactly.
And if you go to Italy and ask for a pineapple on a pizza, they'll throw you. Send it home.
They just send the mafia around to just maim you and your family. Yeah. I feel we've digressed there. Coming back to the Mandalorian, much like the mafia areas of certain parts of the world, the Mandalorian goes very much a Western theme, doesn't it? Where there's a massive power vacuum, despots and lunatics are getting on with doing pretty much whatever they want, and the poor ordinary folk can do quite literally sod all about it.
Well, I mean, this picks up quite nicely where he's obviously the Mandalorian is undertaking his latest job. And, you know, you've sort of got the style you saw from A New Hope with the cantina and that dusty. Yeah. It was always the way, pardon the pun. That you're too slow, mate. You're picking up on Dave's joke there. He's been there. Get your own jokes, you lazy sod. George Lucas was always trying to do sort of the way of the warrior stuff, wasn't he? Where it was going to be the Japanese type films with the Wild West films, that they were his go-tos for films. So he was trying to have a sort of a soap opera, a Wild West style soap opera in space, wasn't it? Yeah. So for this, that just fits nicely into this, where you can see it's all dusty and he's sort of the sheriff.
He's like the Clint Eastwood character in here.
Yeah, so there's a few dollars more and all that type of inspiration.
Well, he nearly says as much as Clint Eastwood. You can't see his face throughout, can you?
Yeah. Exactly.
What about the music, though? How much of that general vibe is made by that theme tune? Because it is an incredibly catchy tune. That's one of the things that I enjoyed about the show, is it's one of the few shows I didn't flick past the end credits. Yeah. Usually, apart from Marvel, when you know there's going to be a post-credit scene, any other show, as soon as the credits start rolling, unless I'm interested in who particularly played a part, I just turn it off. And this one, I listened to it. Again, the only other one that was like that was Deep Space Nine. I quite got into the Deep Space Nine intro. I don't know. I'd still skip it, fast forward it if I could. I'm too impatient. I want to get stuck into the story. They don't really let you do that on Disney Plus, do they? They make you sort of watch through it. I mean, you can skip small bits, but I think you skip about 3 seconds and it's not really worth doing. You might as well sit through it. Shall we go through? I mean, it's difficult to go through the story arc, particularly without any notes. So, Mark, if you want to pick up a story arc type discussion, I might be reliant upon you. From what I can remember, he gets sent to kill Baby Yoda, decides not to, spends the rest of the show keeping Baby Yoda alive, trying to find his family or take him back to his people, and thus ends season 1. That's like the full extent of what I can remember. Well, I mean, I was going to go just briefly bimble across the episodes, which was picking up. Bimble away. Bimble across the episodes, because I mean, the thing that I was going to just say to bookend your comment, the reason why I watched the intro with the music is because they're only about 35-minute episodes. They're not massive episodes, so as soon as you fast forward, half your episode's gone. It's just Mandalorian turns up and then it's the din. But it doesn't feel like 35 minutes. These episodes just
it feels like a film.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like a little mini film, and the best thing about it is you're always wanting the next one.
Exactly, which is why it's a binge-worthy show. So, I mean, if you're happy to just kind of, I suppose, bullet point our way through each of the episodes. Let's do it.
Hey, I've got some notes, by the way, so...
Oh, well, hey. Hang on. Yeah, you're sitting there pretending you haven't got any notes, and you're sitting there with them sort of hidden away. So, if we start with Chapter 1, The Mandalorian, obviously we meet the Mandalorian, funnily enough. Yeah, well, I hope so. I'd be very upset if someone else turned up. And obviously he's completing his latest job, which is to pick up Mithril, who is in the cantina on the planet Moldo Kreese, and to secure the bounty in Carbonite, which again, let's call back to Han Solo. It brings all that full circle.
with all the carbonite again.
Can I just stop you there for a second? This beginning bit, I mean, it tickled me a touch, but when he gets what can only be described as a taxi driver to drop him off back at his ship, one assumes that taxi driver's driven around there before and therefore is aware that an enormous thing can literally burst out of the ice at any point and destroy him in a blink of an eye, and will be perhaps a bit keener just to drop him off, Ricky Tick, and get off. Whereas, I mean, the guy seemed quite blasé, to be perfectly frank. And when he got gotted, I'm thinking, well, it's your own stupid fault, because one assumes you knew this thing was there and you just didn't care.
Not a very good taxi driver if he doesn't know his way around.
No, well, he's not getting a tip, is he? Continue, Mark. I just wanted to get that off my chest.
Yeah. That was kind of his intro, and so it sets the scene of what he's doing. He's obviously a bounty hunter. That's part of what his sect deals with. He's part of that order. And then obviously then he's looking for more work. So he heads off to Navarro and he bumps into Beef. So it's Beef. It sounds like something I've just ordered off me Chinese menu. I was going to say Beef Credo. It's not Beef Credo. It's Grief Cargo, which is what happens when you order from a courier. So yeah, Grief Cargo, played by Carl Weathers, famous for being the guy with a massive gun in Predator and also playing Apollo Creed.
Yeah,
he's bimbled around. He's popped up in a few shows that I've seen, but here he is. We've wheeled him back out. So basically has a conversation with him and says, we've got any work for me? And he's like, well, I can only offer you some jobs that are kind of off the books sort of thing. And he's like, well, dealing directly with a client. And then we get a massive introduction to world-famous director Werner Herzog, controversial director, in fact, but director nonetheless. So he is, as we find out, an Empire official because he's clearly being protected by the stormtroopers, and he wants him to track down this thing. And obviously, he gives him a tracking device, and you find out that this is a 50-year-old tracking signal. So then Mandalorian decides, oh, right, I'm going to find that. So off he pops to the planet of Arla 7, which is basically where he finds all the blags. Those little, some angry, I compare them to like Karens. You know, when you get a Karen who wants to get your manager and sack you because you've parked in a parking space. They're like little blags, aren't they? Just really angry Karens everywhere going, oh,
you blag.
Mask on. Have you had your vaccine? So that just reminds me of like proper angry Karens wanting to get you sacked. So then, and obviously you see the wonderful Cooley, which again, practical effects, voiced by the amazing Nick Nolte, who they wheeled him out of retirement.
I loved him. He is the epitome of how I live my life, where people say something, you go, I have spoken. And you just cut people off at the knees. You go, no, not interested. Stop there. Don't care. I have spoken. Yeah.
And then Karen punches you out.
Then the blur gets me.
So yeah, wonderful Nick Nolte, and then he gives him indicating to where this signal may well be, and then we kind of fast forward in the episode to a settlement, and he sees a few armed guards, has a bit of fight, bumps into IG-11, a bounty hunter droid that we've seen before in Empire Strikes Back. So then another little callback to that, and obviously anyone who played the game SWTOR will know that AAG droids were, I think, upgraded by the KS models. I probably got that wrong, so writing if you're not happy.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, you could be just talking Greek right now. Yeah, you've lost me there, yeah. I'm just nodding. I'm nodding, just pretending that I know the answer to that.
The really good thing about that is the IG-11 is voiced by New Zealand director and actor. What's the guy?
Taika Waititi, yeah. You see, you didn't know that, did you?
Is that because you Googled it, you dick?
No, I knew that anyway. I recognise his voice.
Well, he's got wonderful. He plays Korg, doesn't he? In the
Thor.
Thor, yeah. So he's obviously, they agree to work together for the benefit of the partnership, and then they have to fight their way through. They're
both after the same thing, aren't they?
Yeah, well, that's right. But he obviously, being an android or a robot, however you want to put it, is obviously focused on the singular thing.
Yeah.
And then,
but why does it? Quick question: why does the robot want a bounty, though? I mean, presumably being a robot, it doesn't really care about a bounty because it's not like it can go buy new stuff, particularly because it's a robot. What can it buy?
Well, like R2-D2 and CP3O, or CP3O is a protocol droid. He's been programmed that way.
Yeah, but they have a debate over sharing the bounty, don't they, by teaming up together? And it didn't really make a huge amount of sense because I just didn't see why...
He wouldn't be bothered, would he?
No, why would an android give a flying monkeys about a bounty? It's not going to bite itself in.
He did it in Empire. That's what they've been trained to do.
Yes, but I'm allowed to criticise it. I can't be nice all the way through about this show. I've got to have a moan about something.
I mean, it's a good character, and again, for the fans, it was just a nice callback. And then we find out that the actual target turns out to be, as people have been kind of giving him the title, Baby Yoda. And so IG-11, to address Mark's point, IG-11 wants the baby dead, And Mando says he doesn't agree with that and probably blasts IG out of commission. And then he's obviously got this pack, which he's having to deal with. And that's kind of wraps up, unless anyone else has got lots of notes, that kind of wraps up chapter 1 in terms of bullet points.
No, it feels like there's more in this first episode.
But we also get to see about his armor and he goes downstairs, doesn't he, into the...
Yeah, he does.
Into the forgery.
Yeah, he does. After he's brought the fella back in the carbonite, he gets paid and he takes his dollar and gets himself, was it like a new shoulder pad or something?
Yeah.
Very 80s.
Yeah, it's all he can afford, yeah.
Yeah.
That's episode 3.
Is it? It's not. I'm sure it's episode 1 where he goes and gets himself some.
He meets the armor in episode 3.
No, he doesn't, because he gets in episode 1 when he meets the big bad who wants Baby Yoda dead. What he does is he gets a piece of his pay up front, and he gets paid for the person that we see him bring back off the planet where the taxi driver gets nailed. And like Dave says, he gets himself a new shoulder pad because it's broken. Yeah. And then when he brings Baby Yoda back, he gets a load of Wonga, doesn't he? Yeah, and he goes and gets himself a whole new outfit of sexiness. So we don't. The fact is, Mark, we don't need notes. We just know shit. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, continue with episode 2, Mark. Now we've corrected you on some of the fundamentals. That's what we're here for, Dave, innit? Just to pick up the loose ends.
I appreciate the picking up the slack. Yeah, very good, guys. But did you have any other bits that I've missed apart from getting a bit of a shoulder pad? Apart from getting a shoulder pad, what else did I miss?
That's all right. Dave says you did well there. So
anyway, I've spoken, so shut up.
Keep going, Tiger.
Most kind. So moving swiftly on to chapter 2, noted the title is The Child. We now have an upgrade. Yoda's now in a basket case. Yeah. So he now comes with his own carry case, making it a lot easier. I mean, to be fair, that's quite a good bit of technology. If you're going shopping and you can't be bothered carrying something, you just let it float on its own, put all your bread in there.
When you buy the Baby Yoda in real life, do you get a carry case or does it just come on its Todd?
Comes on its own because I actually bought it as a gift.
Yeah, we've got one.
Oh, have you? Yeah. What does it do?
Well, you can get 2, can't you? You can get the one that just sits there, and you can get the Aldan animatronic one that does all. We didn't buy that one.
Was that a bit more expensive, was it?
Too expensive.
Well, I pre-ordered it when I saw it on Hasbro being promoted. I got both of them, not for me as a gift. And they were talking, it was when it was being advertised, it was being shown in the carry case. And obviously you have to make the point that it doesn't come with the carry case. But yeah.
And do you know what? I hated that. And it was particularly for things like Star Wars, where you'd see magazines. This is pre-internet kids. It did exist. And you'd get these toy magazines, a bit like the Argos catalogues. And as a kid, I'd sit and flick through it over Christmas, trying to make up a list of what I wanted. And they'd take pictures of all these toys with the most amazing scenes and all the stuff. And when you asked for the toy, you sort of didn't really know which part of that photograph you were going to get. Were you going to get this cool background, or was it just going to be the figure on its own?
And it was always just the figure.
It was always just a figure, wasn't it?
Yeah. So you had to play with it on the carpet, and it wasn't the same, was it?
No, it wasn't.
He was most unhappy about that fact.
Well, he didn't even know they were because his brother hadn't properly explained them to him.
I knew nothing about them. I just got these toys at Christmas and thought, what are these?
Dave was a bit upset. He was expecting a huge boulder to be chasing him down the corridor, and it's like, you just give me the synopsis for Raiders of the Lost Ark. Imagine if he gave you the synopsis for Graffiti. He just gave you a random George Lucas film, and he went, "Oh yeah, it's a very good film. There's like loads of kids in the 50s just sitting on cars bonnets." That doesn't sound very sci-fi.
No.
Right.
Anyway,
back to it.
So Baby Yoda now comes with his own carry case, and he is now being transported with the Mandalorian across the Avala 7 desert. And then suddenly, as we find out along the way, the little cheeky Jawas, they've ruined his ship, haven't they?
Yeah.
What?
The ship apart.
This is another thing, right? Do you know in films where they land the spaceship and then they just fuck off wherever it is that they go in and do the thing? It always bothers the shit out of me because my fear is exactly what happens here. Like on Star Trek or basically any sci-fi where they land the spaceship in a car park and then just leave it, and it's like, are you going to lock it up? Or are you going to put some force field on it because some little meth's going to come in and break into it? Nick your stereo. And this is exactly what happened. This is like my worst nightmare for my spaceship, coming back and finding it just with its wheels.
What, your Razor Crest?
Yeah.
It's like parking in Manchester.
Every time they land, they just kind of leave it. And particularly when they leave the door down, it's like, wow, why don't you just hang a sign saying, come on in and help yourself?
They do.
Which they obviously, well, in this case, they did. But anyway, I've got it off my chest now. Keep going.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously comes back and his ship has been turned into a car.
Vandals, send him to prison.
Yeah, well, he doesn't let it lie, does he?
No, he
And
doesn't.
in true bounty hunter form, he
gets his ass kicked.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
He chases the Jawas down, and with the help of Kuils, he basically strikes a deal, and he acquires what is...
Whoa. You've just skipped that bit out. He tracks him down, gets his ass kicked, and has to rely upon his mate to get him out of the shit and to get his shit back. That's an entirely different description of the circumstances. Keep it real, Mark.
I thought the ass kicking was what you covered.
Well, no, it was the way you described it. I felt you made it sound like, we tracked them down, entered straight into negotiations. No, he didn't. That was only when he had no other choice but to negotiate, because they basically hot-rodded him with a
Just said you're not
stick.
getting it back.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's be honest, though, it is the equivalent of going into a school playground and punching out some kids. I mean, the size of the Mandalorian with all of his weapon systems, and then you've got people dressed in their pajamas and dressing gowns.
Yeah.
And apparently you're not allowed to punch kids these days, so he was in the wrong, apparently.
Enough of them need a good punching, in my opinion.
Moving swiftly along before we get a phone call from MI5.
So as Mark quite rightly says, there was a little bit more altercation going on rather than that, and our friend from episode 1 is able to strike a deal, and he acquires the egg, and they give it back to him, and basically...
But then you just eat the egg. It's like a Cadbury's cream egg.
Oh, did it make you want to eat a Cadbury's cream egg as well?
It was just about a big Cadbury's cream egg.
Oh, that goo in the middle. So when you eat your Cadbury's cream egg, Dave, do you bite the top off and lick out the bit in the middle, or do you just go full in?
Go for it.
You shove it right in?
Yeah.
The whole thing?
No, sorry, top off and...
No, hang on a minute. I don't want to know what you're wearing. I mean, I want to know how you're eating the egg.
Eat the top off and take the go out.
I'm still not sure, Matt, whether we're talking about the egg or what he's doing while he's eating the egg.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, Dave, he was asking you how you eat a Cadbury's cream egg, not what you get up to at night.
Right. Yeah.
I appreciate the backstory, though, David. We'll have to do a full series on this, but we'll just stick to the fact that you like to just bite the end off and then lick it out.
Keep going.
It doesn't matter what I say. It's a double entendre.
It's finished.
It is done. This is the way.
Anyway, they've eaten the egg.
So that is it. So keep going on the egg.
And they give him all his stuff back.
They don't help him rebuild it, though, do they? I'm not being funny. No. Part of me negotiation would have been, A, give me it back, and B, you can put it back where you found it, you lazy little cretins.
Because there's some work to do on that.
Fast. They haven't left an awful lot by the time they find it.
He's having a bit of a bad day, though, isn't he, our Mandalorian, on this episode, because he has to then face down after having to chase after a pile of scrote to run after his wheels. He basically then has to put it together, but also he has to face down a mudhorn, which, to be honest, after a hefty fight in the mud...
Let's not beat around the bush. He gets his ass kicked for a second time. And but for Baby Yoda, he'd have probably bitten the bullet as well.
Indeed, and this is where we get an introduction to his force powers, who's able to levitate the mudhorn. It's obviously pretty tiring work, because no sooner has Baby Yoda done this is he kind of yawns and goes into a coma. And then obviously this time is obviously the Mandalorian's trying to fix the Razor Crest, and the Mandalorian offers Kuil a job to be with him, and he says, no, I'm happy to be free of servitude. And then the Mandalorian flies off into the sunset, and we have the credits roll.
It's quite interesting, though, about that, because he admits, doesn't he, Cruel, that he worked for the Empire. So for all intent and purposes, during the first original movies, he would have been seen as the bad guy because he's working for the Empire. And it sort of adds a bit of nuance that he was a slave, which then does beg the question, how many other people who were perceived as bad guys, and going back to Mark's taking a moral stance on who died on the Death Star, how many of those people on there were there by virtue of being forced on there as slaves or through threats, and were ultimately good people, a bit like Cruel, but just found themselves in a shitty situation. Deep, man.
Well, you see that, don't you, in Rogue One, don't you, and stuff, and how certain people, in fact, the film that's not wonderful, but Solo, you see, the kind of prequel film Solo, you see that he went for a job with the Empire. Yeah. And it's kind of, if you wanted to have a callback, it's like sort of in our history, we've had situations where people were like, well, I'm just following orders. The old classic.
Well, Dave, we should prefix this again with the fact that Mark's trying to make this sound like it's an honourable thing that you're forced to do. But that's because Mark did actually apply for a job as a stormtrooper, didn't you?
I did.
Legitimately applied for a job as the Empire. He did want to join the Empire. He did apply to be. And why didn't they have you, Mark?
There's two reasons. So the first time, this is a true story, Dave. It's honestly right. So the first time I wasn't allowed to be a stormtrooper because they were clones at the time I was applying, and they're 5'8".
Right.
I'm 5'10", and I'm 5'8". So that's the very heightest. I love in the world will equal opportunities exist.
That's terrible.
So the second time when I applied, I was told we only recruit around London.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
It's nice at the minute.
Because it was when the stormtroopers like now, and they weren't clones, and you could also be different genders.
Yeah.
This is pre the recent election where the North took back some of its honour and its power from the South. At which point Mark would have been able to join the evil Empire and be a stormtrooper.
So I've missed out twice, and then people say, "Well, why don't you just tell people you were a stormtrooper?" It's like, well, who am I fooling? No one cares less. No. No one cares. You tell someone you're a stormtrooper, they go, "All right," and then the new person you're lying to is yourself.
And that just makes you sad inside.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, it's sad inside your evil heart.
Although, update that story, I was working with someone the other day who was a stormtrooper, and he said to me, his exact words were, "You dodged a bullet." And I said, "Oh, really? Why?" And he said, "Well, you weren't allowed to eat anything for 8 hours, and they were 16-hour days." And he said, in fact, it was that bad one stormtrooper shot himself.
Well, you'd know all about that in Star Wars, wouldn't you?
I might upgrade to shit.
That role was quite literally made for you, wasn't it?
Yeah. So now if you ask the question, how do stormtroopers go to the toilet? Well, basically inside the costume.
Yeah. So is it like method acting then? Because it's the evil Empire, so they're just making you...
Yeah.
They're making
shit everywhere. Yeah. Just like you look at someone and you think, do they even know you're looking at them? You're just basically naked inside that costume, shitting yourself.
Oh, what a horrible thought. Move on to episode 3.
Yeah.
Episode 3, The Sin. We get an introduction to Yoda, who is now roaming around the ship's cockpit, messing around with his balls. Which leads us into that company that wanted us to sponsor their podcast.
Oh, well, we didn't mention that because I broke the recording. Do I now have to explain this? Now you've dropped me in it again.
Yeah, because you're giggling.
So for the benefit of the people who weren't able to listen to the first version of the recording before I realised I'd accidentally unplugged the recording wire, we received a message the other day saying, "Hi, hope you're good. I work with a client who needs podcasters to receive a review kit for our product, and they will promote your podcast in return. If interested in teaming up with this brand and earning whilst you do so, please message at my smooth balls." In fact, it's nice. So at smooth my balls. And I can't decide whether it's real or not. But
I think you should reply and see if we can do an irreverent review of it. I think that would be quite hilarious, just for our own benefit.
Well, it can't be any more irreverent than the reviews they've got actually on their Instagram page. So they've got, "My balls have never been so fresh. Just had to have a morning dump and thought, why not do something productive while I'm waiting? Came out with my SMB trimmer, whipped it out like a Wild West cowboy. Yeehaw."
Yeah, two things wrong with that is, one, what is he eating to have a dump that is the same time as you can shave your balls? Two, when I wake up in the morning, I am that blurry-eyed, I'd end up cutting my foreskin off.
Well, the other one was one word, amazing. My missus loved how clean and tidy I was after using your product. Left my balls as smooth as eggs.
He must have pubes like a bear settee.
So watch this. Messages on social media as to whether or not I should message back and actually find out whether they're real.
Go for the pizzas.
I don't pubes on my pizzas, Dave.
Yeah. Well, I suppose if you've got 66, you've got a spare one that you could perhaps try it on.
Yeah. So Dave not only topless eating 3 meg, he's also wiping.
He's shaving his pubes onto a pizza as well. At the same time. Oh, what a
Didn't
thought.
realise you went into sloth.
Oh, please go back to episode 3 or else I won't sleep tonight.
Yeah, so he's playing with his balls and there's a little bit of a humorous... Dave's not playing with his balls. This is Baby Yoda. And there's a bit of a to and fro in between Mandalorian and Baby Yoda, where he's just basically saying, "Can you give us me gear sticks?
Can you give me my balls back?"
Yeah, can I have them, please? They're in my purse.
Baby Yoda, you're not allowed to touch my balls without my permission.
Well, there's a clear disregard to consent, isn't there? It appears that Baby Yoda can just grab your balls willy-nilly and try and eat them.
And because he's cute, he gets away with it.
He gets away with it.
Exactly. Which is, I'm going to try that when I'm next in Boots. Although one of my classic lines was when I was queuing for a meal deal, I did turn around to an attractive lady behind me and I went, "You look lovely. You're like a mahogany table." In which case I destroyed all chances at that point. You're very attractive. You've got lovely skin, like a mahogany table. I just want to buff you up.
Oh my God. I hope you really didn't say that to anyone.
That's exactly what I said, but I did it on purpose to destroy any chance of having to take it further and have to get married.
There you go then.
So that never happened. So back on the Razor Crest, and it returns to Navarro, where the Mandalorian makes his delivery to his client, who, although at this point he is a little bit kind of having a bit of moment of conscience to think whether he should be handing over this baby or whatever it is, a really, really old man, to his client.
There's lots of questions there in handing a baby over to an old man.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't get away with that nowadays, would you? It sounds very 1970s BBC DJ-esque.
Who ruined my childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big shout out to Rolf Harris. Well, basically then, after doing that, as you rightly said earlier on, he then takes, having been given his ice cream maker full of Beskar, he whizzes back to Emily Swallow, who is the woman who does the voice and plays the armourer, to get his shiny armour.
He goes all bling, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, Beskar is by far the greatest, which is why it can have laser shots ricochet off it and things like that. Yeah. So he's looking...
I felt he should have come out of that, to a hip-hop gangster tune with all these bling, and maybe his ship can start bounce up and down, like those cars do in the music videos. Yeah. It just starts bouncing to the beat. Boom, boom, boom.
Like a bit of drum and bass.
And we do also meet the other Mandalorian, don't you, Mark?
Oh, we meet a few, don't we? There's a couple.
Down there.
Yeah.
Well, they're all part of this guild. All the guilds have different agreements of what they're going to do. So he's part of this guild, and obviously the armourer is the person who brings all the stuff back, and she's the only person who can melt it down. Yeah. And I think they've got different skill sets, because there's a heavy, sort of a berserker Mandalorian, and there's different ones who are trained in different weapon systems. So then... Obviously, now with his new armor, we fast forward and he goes back to the cantina area where Grief has a conversation with him and he tells him to walk away and enjoy the bounty he's had. But because there's been weighing on him, he's thinking about giving this baby away or whatever. He ends up deciding to take a visit back to the client and storm his way in. So we get this action scene, don't we, with all of the stormtroopers. Now, there's a thing, people, fans at the YouTube being fans of the Star Wars, you would know this, about stormtroopers being very poor at shooting people. The fact remains that actually stormtroopers, if you know the history of stormtroopers, are very, very, very well trained. So the fact that they were missing Luke in all the Star Wars films would indicate that they were purposely trying to not hit him, because obviously he was going to move over to the dark side. So that, I mean,
they were drunk.
Well, maybe that, or they've been, ordered 66 pizzas.
Yeah.
And they're in a food coma.
They had double vision meat sweats.
Or maybe, or they all shat themselves. I don't know. But basically, they are very well trained. So the myth that they can't shoot anything is incorrect. In fact, it may well be to lead you into a false sense of security. But because the Mandalorian is a highly trained bounty hunter, he basically dispatches them very quickly and arrives just in time to stop Dr. Pershing from doing whatever experiments were going to happen on him.
Yeah.
I think at this particular stage of the episode, we think he's probably trying to extract the midichlorians.
Yes, they appear again.
Thankfully, they don't mention them, though, because they didn't want to subject themselves to ridicule by the fans.
Yeah, I noticed that. They'd very carefully not say that. So basically then, because of this action, which goes against one of the rules, it basically means that all the mercenaries within that town area suddenly come after Mando, and he flees with Baby Yoda, and even the person who was kind of telling him to enjoy his bounty, Grief, tries to take him down.
But we had found out that they'd all been tasked with finding.
Yes. Well, that was an interesting part of the episode, wasn't it? Because all their little bounty hunter apps were basically sending them LinkedIn profiles, telling you've just had a message, kill the Mando.
He's on the loose again, so you've got to go find him.
So, Dave, did you get one? Did you get a notification? You were too busy eating an egg.
I know I had me 66 pizzas to finish off.
Yeah. Did you just text back saying, I'm halfway through a meat?
I'll be there in a minute.
I said, I've got the top off my egg and my pizzas.
I'm busy.
Yeah, I'm tongue deep in an egg.
I've got 66 pizzas.
I'm currently shaving my pubes onto a pizza.
I've got to shave my pubes onto a pizza.
Oh, dear.
Oh, my word. So anyway, Dave's not shaving his pubes, but Grief saying to him, right, I'm going to take him down. And then he flees to his ship. Then we move on to basically comes to the end of the episode. Mandalorian and the Baby Yoda are on the run.
Now, you mentioned Grief Karga, as in Carl Weathers' character. Yes. He was only supposed to be in the first episode, wasn't he? But yeah, they liked the character so much, they kept him on.
This is the good thing with the show is it wasn't to try and do a DC and go, oh, by the way, here's such and such. Oh, by the way, here's 10 seconds, such as. The idea was, as the Mandalorian is going through his journey, these people pop up as milestones or distractions, and then you deal with those and then you move on. But because fans loved certain characters, they did, in fact, as you rightly say, bring him back.
I think this is what really impressed me about this show. And I'm going to use Star Trek Discovery as the example of an alternative. And if anyone's listened to our Disco Fever Star Trek Discovery podcast show, you'll have heard me bang on about this before. But the problem with Star Trek Discovery is you've got a cast of people who are all on the bridge or a parcel of the crew, and it feels like they did nothing with the characters. They gave you no story arc, so you didn't know the bloody hell they were. You didn't really care about them whatsoever. And then occasionally they realised that they could probably do with padding that out a little bit, and suddenly gave you a deluge of information in about 10 seconds, and all of a sudden you were supposed to care about that character. Where in actual fact, sort of 3 seasons in, still most of the crew they could wipe out, and I actually wouldn't care one iota. The difference with The Mandalorian is at no point do you feel like you're being force-fed information so that you care about the character, and at no point do I feel like I needed to know more about Grief and his background, and yet I still really liked his character, and I was still very intrigued as to how and where he fitted into the storyline. And I think that's what The Mandalorian does so well in this entire first season, where they introduce lots of new characters, but it doesn't feel like you're having them thrust upon you, so they've got a bigger cast of people. It kind of, they introduce them when it fits into the story arc. They serve the purpose for which the story arc needs, and then they're either kept on or moved off, subject to whether or not they're still needed, and you kind of learn stuff as and when you need to and when you want to. And I thought that was a really clever way of doing it.
They make use of, when you're building a narrative and you have a storyline to follow, that you have a set circumstances where you want your hero to be in. They use, and I've mentioned it in our Discovery podcast, the use of a cipher. And that's basically a character written simply to move the story forward or provide exposition or whatever you want that cipher to do, which allows to drive the story forward, which without boring the viewer. And I think The Mandalorian, as you exactly
you don't have to like build a backstory.
No,
you know
it
in your head where they probably come from and where they're going.
Well, you put the dots together yourself. Krull's a great example. He mentions the fact that he's not going to work for anyone anymore because he's been a slave most of his life. He's had to work for the Empire. He didn't like the stuff he was made to do, and now he wants to sit in peace. I don't need to know the backstory. I don't need to see flashbacks of how dreadful his life was. I already can put those dots together. You almost feel the guy's pain, and you can fully empathise with what it is he wants to do and why he wants to do it. And then you draw a line under that and let him get on with doing his part of fulfilling the story arc. Whereas in Discovery, what you'd have to do is do a flashback to show how tragic the life was, and to make sure that we highlight how many people they killed, and then that they had 2 sisters and they died tragically, and that left him scarred for the rest of his life. And that's why and it's like, I don't need to know all that shit. I just need to know that he did bad stuff, he didn't really like it, and he don't want to do it ever again. Move on.
And that's why I think it works, is it's not shoehorning everything that we know about Star Wars into, the season. It will happen naturally. And given that this show is probably going to get 5 seasons, I mean, they're filming seasons 3 and 4 back to back right now because they've very cleverly thought ahead, and using the technology they've developed and pioneered is all COVID friendly. They've had people on set in their own caravans since lockdown. So they're filming season 3 and 4 back to back. Now, we know they're going to probably do more. That the reality is that because they can tell the story and weave into this bits and pieces that fans will love, but also create its own direction, it doesn't need to overwhelm the viewer, because the viewer as Mark said, it's implied that if you've seen the Star Wars films, you're probably going to know a little bit about it.
And all these characters can appear in other things as well, can't they?
Yeah.
Any other shoot-off or whatever.
Well, exactly. It's the Mandalorian, isn't it? Yeah. It's not the Blurg show.
No.
So
I would watch that show, though.
Well, that'll be a reality show.
Yeah.
Eating with the blurgs.
So that's, for me, was one of the main things, and it wasn't heavy salad. It wasn't trying to be clever. It wasn't being political. It wasn't trying to tell me about, things going on in 20th century Earth. It was basically keeping it real for the period that we know and love. It was all pioneering. It was using practical effects. And they're all things that are a standout for me. And as Mark said earlier on, it didn't seem like it was a 38-minute episode.
No,
and you can binge it. At the end of it, you have that drop of dopamine. If any show that gives you that feeling of sadness at the end of it, it's hit all the right notes for me on a psychological level.
And I'm feeling sad because we've just ended episode 3. So what about episode 4, Mark?
I like the segue.
Thank you.
Chapter 4, Sanctuary. Mandalorian is now flying to the planet of Sorgon and finds that there was a local village being terrorized by raiders. And obviously the villagers see that the Mandalorian's arrived and they ask him for help. He kind of reluctantly agrees, but he comes across our latest cipher, Cara Dune, played by the wonderful female wrestler WWE. I was going to say WWF, but that's the worldwide.
Well, it used to be WWF in our day, didn't it?
Yeah.
And then someone got a letter from a lawyer.
No, yeah. So WWE wrestler Gina Carano, people will know her from various films, well known.
More recently from a social media tweets, but let's not dwell on them, eh?
Later on.
That's season 2, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it turns out her story, she was a former shock trooper for the rebels, and it turns out that she's been hiding out on Sorgan, and basically she helps him. They manage to do the usual thing, which is a bit of an A-team situation, if anyone fans of the A-team, where they get all the villagers to be, instead of being farmers,
teach them to fight.
They train them, don't they? They give them pitchforks and hand-to-hand combat and train them in weapons and stuff like that. And then sort of kind of turn them into the Ewoks in a way.
Yeah.
And they fight back against the ATST. And then meanwhile, while that's going on in the episode, Baby Yoda is playing with the kids.
Oh, it's
being
so
all
sweet,
cute, isn't he?
All cutie.
And you can hear Disney laughing their heads off at the merchandising opportunities here because it's near to Christmas and they're going,
He's got a mercenary streak, though, because whenever he sees a frog, he just wants to eat it.
Well, let's be honest. He's like that kid who used to hang around your packed lunch and just steal bits out. And you go, oh, mate, come on, look the size of you. If anything, stop putting that in your mouth. I mean, do we know if he likes frogs or is he just storing them to keep them warm? We don't even know. What's the diet?
I think he does eat one, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. I mean, they make him spit it out. He didn't voluntarily put it in his mouth and then spit it out. He was told to spit it out.
He almost, as you say, eats a frog. He's a bit of a greedy guy. Imagine him on an all-you-can-eat buffet.
And Mando nearly gets himself a bit of love as well, because he's got that lady who seems to quite fancy a person who she's never seen.
The widow, Amira.
Yeah, she's right in there, isn't she? She's like,
to stay and everything.
I love a bit of bling. Why don't you hang around and keep your helmet on?
Or not, as the case may be.
It's a bit like online dating, isn't it? Where people put a photograph on from 5 years ago. He's got a helmet on. No one looks like, he doesn't know what it looks like. It could be a woman underneath there. It could be anyone. And then they go, oh, I just love Beskar. Let me buff you up. That sounds like one of my chat-up lines. Obviously, it turns out that not only do they kind of form a bond, but she's pretty good with a blaster. They've kind of bonded over the idea of killing people, which is always a winner. For
very romantic.
I wonder what one of their dates would be. Would it be like just going to slaughter a cantina?
Yeah.
So anyway, he does make a bond with Amira, and the idea is that he's going to leave Baby Yoda with them because he's traveling around, and obviously he doesn't want to put him at risk. But it turns out that obviously the bounty hunters are still after Baby Yoda.
Yeah.
So rather than risk his newfound love, Mandalorian decides that he needs to keep on the move and obviously Baby Yoda does one little cute face and all the people are going, oh no, and they decide to go off and keep on the run.
I particularly like this episode because you get the coupe version of the AT-AT. The AT-AT-S, the sports model,
with the red eyes
and the 2 legs instead of the 4 legs. It felt like the 2-door coupe that you go around the Nürburgring in.
Yeah, we have seen them on Endor, though, haven't we?
In your Endor,
we also get Mark. The bounty hunter is from Star Wars, isn't he?
They're all from Star Wars, Dave.
No, from the original.
Right, got you.
Head there, Dave. There's a reason you're on this show.
From A New Hope.
Yes, from A New Hope. Off Tatooine, isn't he?
Good spot.
He's one of those with a big long face, and Mark will know the name of them probably.
He knows all the Torags as Mark.
Yeah.
Oh, the one with the squid face one?
Yes, the one that she shoots in the forest. We get something coming back, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, again, it pays homage to it, doesn't it? It doesn't dwell on it. It's implied when we're in the same star sector as Star Wars is set that these people will be around and these
They're just around anyway.
Yeah, because there's loads of Easter eggs. I mean, I've been very careful not to go on all Easter eggs because some of them are kind of implied that you would see them because of where you are. It's it's like going to Liverpool and not bumping into Scousers.
Yeah,
it's there. They're everywhere. They get around. But the point is that it's all of this wonderful setting and the backdrop to it all builds for the story because you don't need to be told those things. You know them. No. You just settle into it. So absolutely, the species you mentioned is in fact the bounty hunter that we've seen before.
Because you don't really know an awful lot about Cara Dune at this point, but you already start to quite like...
Yes.
Well, I did anyway. I immediately really liked the character. I thought she was interesting. I thought she was quite cool. She could do decent stuff. And I was quite happy to see a bit more of her as the story went on.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the good thing is it dips into these stories and it can decide whether it focuses on them more or less depending on whether it actually adds value to the story. And the other thing that has to be said is because it's a short show with shorter episodes, it has to be clever with the time it's given. So if it's going to go off on tangent and go, here's Cara Dune, oh, by the way, she was a shock trooper, and let's spend a whole episode on her.
Yeah, let's do some flashbacks.
Yeah, it doesn't work. You can very quickly establish her sorrow or her angst based on the fact that she's got a tattoo on her face and how she is.
Well, he basically says, right, I'm off to blow up some Empire people, and she instantly goes, yep, I'm in. Can connect the dots yourself. She doesn't like them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's why it works. So, I mean, unless I've missed anything else, we'll move on to chapter 5.
Do it, Mark. Do it.
So this one's called The Gunslinger. So we kind of open when the Razor Crest is under attack again by another bounty hunter. And obviously he manages to take up the other ship. His own ship ends up getting pretty damaged. So he does a usual pit stop into Tatooine and lands in exactly the same place as we remember the Millennium Falcon landing. And he is met with Peli Motto, who's played by Amy Sedaris, who plays her character wonderfully. And she is given the task to fix his ship again with no droid help. It was made clear because obviously they killed his family. So he's not a big fan of droids. Basically, as a result of her doing it, she wants to get paid. So he has to go around the cantina. Now, this is what I was going to say earlier and got ahead of myself. The cantina he goes to is the same cantina from A New Hope. The interesting thing fans will notice straight away is it is now being run by droids. Now, anyone who fans of the show of Star Wars and New Hope will remember that CP3O and R2D2 were not allowed because they said, we don't serve droids here.
Yes.
And so now it is now being run by droids. As he goes to the cantina, the Mandalorian encounters Toro Calican, and he asks to track down the bounty for a mercenary named Fennec Shand, who's played by the wonderful Ming-Na Wen. Fans of Target Universe.
Shield.
Also, Agents for S.H.I.E.L.D., will know of her. So she, that obviously is the person they're looking for. Toro and Mandalorian track her through the desert with a few nods to where the pod racing was. And we see...
we get speeder bike.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, yeah. Did you have one of those, Dave?
Oh, I haven't got one.
Oh, I had one as a kid. I must admit they were amazing. They had a little button you pressed at the back, and it, in the film when they're with the Ewoks and they blow it up and the bits go everywhere, you push the button, all the bits used to break off in all sorts of directions. It was quality,
It was the way they used to start up, like a proper motorbike.
Yeah.
Yes.
You heard it.
Them.
Yeah, fantastic. So we get those again. And so he tracks her through the Tatooine desert, and there's Jabba's palace, obviously, is on Tatooine. We know this from the films. And then basically they find her, as per usual, when you're employing mercenaries. Typical, as per it tends to go, is he...
crosses him.
Oh, he was such a knobhead, wasn't he, though?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, what a knobhead.
Absolutely.
They just killed him.
I mean, with so little experience in the bounty hunting world, he wanted to get into the guild, which suggests that he was very wet behind the ears. Why would you try and pit yourself against two of the most dangerous bounty hunters in that sector? It just made no sense. When he was doing it, I'm just thinking, you need to die now. There's no other solution that will make me happy other than you just dying a painful death.
Absolutely.
Which brought the malevolent side out of me.
If you're going to be mercenary, you need to be a strong character, don't you? And if you don't bring that through, it doesn't work. So obviously his betrayal fails, and Fennec says to Mando that obviously he is worth a lot more than her. And as I say, Toro's betrayal is foiled by some help from Peli, and the Razor Crest is off again. But we get one of the two exciting moments of this show, or at least season 1, is as the episode comes to an end, we see a dark figure approaching Fennec's body, telling us that possibly she may come back in the future. And who is this dark shadow? Now, fans will pose the question, is it Boba Fett?
Is it Boba Fett?
Is it Boba Fett? Now, we don't know, do we? Because we're on season
Well, we
1.
do, because we've seen the other episodes after this, and we know the answers. But shall we pretend? No. Who is it? Who is it?
Fans will say Boba Fett, but we don't know till next week. Which will give our listeners an opportunity to come back and listen to see episode 2.
Quick, fast forward to next week. Right.
Yes.
Welcome to next week's show.
So chapter 6, The Prisoner, starts with Mandalorian reaching out to a friend, Ran, played by Mark Boone Jr., and he gets hired to go on a jailbreak mission with a shady crew. This is a fantastic episode with fans of Bill Burr, if you listen to his podcast.
I got particularly excited because Sons of Anarchy, that's where I knew the guy from, the hairy, long-haired geezer who sort of puts the team...
Brown.
Yeah, he puts the team together. I was like, wow, Sons of Anarchy, yeah.
This episode is filled with people. You had Richard Iodi from the IT crowd doing the voice of Q90. You had Natalia Tena, who I think she's been in Game of Thrones. I could be wrong, but I think she was in Game of Thrones. She's in there. Bill Burr, famous comedian. And then Clancy Brown, I know him from a few other shows. I'm telling you.
No, it's Mark Boone Jr. I'm on about from Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. Mark Boone Jr. is Sons of Anarchy.
Clancy Brown, yeah, he was the big red dude who looked like a devil.
Yeah, in canon is an actual species that we see, I think, in the cantina.
Now, you see Natalie Tina, who played the blue girl. She was Tonks in Harry Potter.
Yes. I think Game of Thrones. Has she been in Game of Thrones? Is that Game of Thrones or Harry Potter?
She's in all the Harry Potters. Obviously, I'm doing this off the top of my head, which is a bit like an IMDb. Yeah, it's a bit like an IMDb library, Dave, to be honest. Yes, she was in Game of Thrones between 2011 and 2016. My brain is telling me. Continue.
Right. And so anyway, this ragtag group of people are now geared up to do this jailbreak.
It's a bit like the Suicide Squad of Star Wars, isn't it, really?
It's like a low-calorie version of that. So he's obviously aware that these people are not the greatest people to be aligned with. But even so, they managed to take out a whole squad of droids, and then they retrieve Quinn, played by Ismael Cruz Cordova, Zion's brother, and they betray Mando again and leave him in a cell in the prison. Yeah. Obviously, being Mandalorian, he breaks out of the cell, takes down the rest, leaves them alive, that must be said, which is an interesting twist, and then brings Quinn back to Ran with no questions asked.
Yeah.
You have skipped over the fact that they try and leave him in prison to die.
That's probably implied they weren't coming back to feed him pizzas and things, let's be honest. I mean, once you put someone in prison, you don't go back, do you? Unless, of course, you're married to them, in which case that doesn't last long.
Well, you shouldn't really have them in trapped and locked away if you're married to them, one assumes.
I mean, you're not a very good mercenary if you go back to make sure they're still alive. Let's be honest, usually when you leave people to die, the clue's in the title. But it seems that there are no decent people around, because even though he goes back, Ran then tries to kill Mandalorian as he flies away, but he plants a tracker, and the X-Wings, which were piloted by the directors of the show, Deborah Chow and Rick Famuyiwa, and Dave Filoni, who, again, with Jon Favreau, writers of this show and others, were the X-Wing pilots.
He's the proper nerd, though, isn't he? Yeah. From the team. I mean, Favreau clearly loves Star Wars, but he's sort of a next level nerd. He was the one who was like, we need to introduce this, or that's
we
not
need to bring
fact.
That back.
Yeah.
That's why the show works, when you've got a fan basically helming it. And they blow up his base, and that kind of wraps up that episode.
Boom.
So we move on to chapter 7, The Reckoning. He gets a call from his mate Grief, giving him grief, and says there's an opportunity he can't refuse to kind of make things up to him from what had happened on the planet where he was getting hunted down. So he returns to Navarro, but because he's clever and because he's a bounty hunter, he decides to pick up some reinforcements. And this is where we get the reintroduction of Cara, Khalil, and the reprogrammed IG-11. Now, I mentioned the reprogramming because you mentioned earlier about why you would want to do these things as a droid. His protocols have now changed, and he's a bit more in line with being a bit nicer.
Well, they've turned him into a nanny, haven't they, really?
Basically,
the best baby monitor in the universe.
A nanny with a gun. Well, 15 guns.
I saw something the other day on Twitter, and my wife told me to go and get me a baby monitor, and it was a picture of the IG-11.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's the way forward, isn't it?
Yeah.
Basically, Khalil's reprogrammed IG-11 to not be an assassin droid to now serving tea.
Oh, changing nappies.
Yeah, you're not going to argue with him, are you? Is this thing is you don't know, with him being an assassin protocol droid, you don't know whether he's suddenly going to have like a flip. You know, if you accidentally spill tea on him.
Go to bed. No. Go to bed. No.
Yeah.
Go to bed. Yep, off. Going.
Yeah, it's when you get the red eye of doom. Not to be confused with pink eye, Dave. Entirely different.
We're back onto the pizzas and all that again.
I don't know where you put your pizzas.
Let's not
Dave's rubbing salami in his eyes.
No.
Whilst licking eggs.
His top off.
Easter will never be the same again.
You've ruined that holiday for me. So basically, yeah, so Khalil's reprogrammed him, and his new squad go into the outskirts of Navarro, and he reunites with Grief. And the interesting is none of these people really know each other enough to trust each other. So you've got this interesting dynamic where they're all working together, but none of them really know whether they're going to get double-crossed. And going by the last episodes, there's probably going to be a good chance of that. So after fighting off a pack of minors...
In all seriousness, though, did at any point, did any of you two not think that they were going to double cross them at some point? I mean, in Star Wars, they have the good guys and the bad guys, and they look like good guys, and they look like anyone with sharp, pointy teeth, anyone with red eyes, anyone with horns. Like, these are the major characteristics of people. You go, yeah, you're a bad guy. I don't care what you say, you're turning out to be a bad guy. And when these two turn up with Grief, it's like, yeah, there's only one way this is going.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, rules to live by is don't get into cars with people with the horn.
Or red eye.
Yeah. So if you see someone with red eye, sharp teeth,
Just
and the
get
horn,
off quick.
clear off. Yeah. Shouldn't be dogging anyway.
Say no, kids.
Yeah. But then what happens is there's a pack of Minox, which again, a call back to the films, and Grief gets hurt. But then, as if by the powers of Grayskull, Baby Yoda lays hands like Purple Katie on a Reiki table and waves his hands over him and heals him using the Force.
Yeah.
So it's clear that the mercenaries don't know about the Skywalkers or, in fact, the abilities that they have to Force heal. And so, as we find out, Grief decides not to betray Mandalorian and Cara. Instead, the three of them head into town, and Baby Yoda's being looked after by Khalil, who says he'll be safe. Meanwhile, the client is trying to get his new merchandise back and gets a call from his boss, Moff Gideon, played by the wonderful Giancarlo Esposito, who, in everything I've seen, plays a baddie.
Yeah.
Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, Revolution. He's even in a game. He's in a new game when he plays a baddie. So his agent goes, hey, we're coming in. Do you want to be a villain? Yeah, fine.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah. Actually, villains are the best roles to play, if I'm being honest. So he now suddenly arrives surrounded by stormtroopers, ready. And I'm not being funny. This is some firefight, isn't it, guys?
Biggest gun ever.
Wow.
Isn't it? A massive. I mean, that gun he has just basically just shreds that. I mean, we need to get him. What's name in to do some plastering? he shreds that wall. I'm surprised not one person was shot by any of those bullets.
Yeah. Clearly, they went to the same shooting school as those stormtroopers.
Yeah. They missed. I mean, not being funny, the world's biggest gun in not one round hit anyone. So the first wave, in fact, takes out our friend, the client.
Yeah.
He's gone. So they take out the wrong people. But then he sends in some stormtroopers to acquire Baby Yoda from Khalil's care. And they kill our friend, Khalil.
Khalil. He dies. That's quite sad.
Yeah.
We thought he would have survived for future episodes.
So he's gone now, one of our favourites.
Which one's Khalil?
The guy who says, I've spoken.
Yeah. Yes, of course. Fella. Yes.
He's just a nice fella, isn't
he? He seemed pretty sound, didn't he? He was handy to have around.
Just living in his little hut.
Yeah, he's just down to earth.
Fixing shit.
He served the Empire, and he's decided to just take his little piece of heaven, leave everyone alone, do a bit of farming, punch a blag in the face, and, you know, that's it.
And they kill him.
Yeah. So that's what you get for serving the Empire.
Mindless violence, if you ask me.
Terrible.
Absolutely. So that then moves us on to episode 8, the final episode, if I'm right.
It is.
This was quite a good one, which raised a few eyebrows with fans, because obviously we have the speeder bike troopers who have nabbed Baby Yoda, played by the wonderful comedians Jason Sudeikis and Adam Pally. And in fact, there's an interesting story here, because in the episode, they punch Baby Yoda.
Yeah, well, this is funny.
And basically, he was told by Jon Favreau, "Don't punch him." That's like $250,000 worth of thing. And they apparently on set, they treat Baby Yoda as one of the cast. But Jon Favreau was like, "You do realize that this is like." It's probably $500,000. It's probably a bit more than 250,000.
It's like punching someone's kid.
Yeah. So I think the script called for him to punch him, but I think he punched him that hard. And he obviously had a word in his ear and went, just to let you know, that's about £500,000 worth of effects. Because it's some of his puppetry, but it's an actual working, fully functional, atomically correct Yoda.
It's a puppet.
They treat it as an actual member of the cast. In fact, there's actual behind-the-scenes shots of Pedro Pascal talking to Baby Yoda.
Yeah, it's just a bit weird, though, isn't it?
Well, it's a bit like we do in our house with ours. You watch the telly. He watches the footy. He actually didn't want to come here today, so I didn't bring him with me.
Yoda, go get me a beer from the fridge. Go on, you lazy little toad.
That'd be quite cool, because he could just like force it over to you, couldn't he?
Well, you see, to be honest, Mark, if Dave hadn't been so stingy, he could have bought the animatronic one that probably would have gone to the fridge to get him a beer.
That, yeah.
There's the failings in your plan there, Dave. Yeah. You've got the
cushion with a head.
The one that doesn't move, the inanimate object version, which is neither use nor ornament for getting beers from the fridge.
Yeah.
The animatronic one is pretty good, because when you lie it down, it does the sleeping. It snores.
I've got 2 dogs that do that, and I keep on getting told every morning that I do that as well, so I don't need a Yoda doing that for me now.
No.
Basically, after punching Baby Yoda, they get what's coming to them, and swift justice is delivered by IG-11, who, doing his nursemaid duty, basically
rescues him.
Commits murder.
Commits murder. That's one of the criteria for a baby minder. Can you kill?
Yeah.
Well, there's been some famous au pairs over the years who've been up for murder.
Well, Vin Diesel was in the movie.
Oh, he was like the nanny. Yeah, that was one. I've never seen that film because he just gave me a headache looking at the title.
Yeah, but meanwhile, Mandalorian's team and Moff Gideon's Stormtrooper team has still got the standoff going on. And so somebody in the group says, I know, shall we decide to escape via the sewers? And then just as basically the Imperial forces set up a huge blaster beforehand, Gideon is trying to buy time, and Moff Gideon is negotiating with Mandalorian, and basically the firefight suddenly gets interesting because, again, to the rescue, IG-11 turns up, Mandalorian gets injured, and he does what every hero says and goes, no, go on without me. No, save yourselves. As you do when you're group, you go, all right, bye.
Dive down into the sewers.
Good friends there. No, save yourselves. Okay, thank you, bye. So they do that and they disappear. But basically, Baby Yoda's trying to be helpful, which is quite funny because he's quite powerful, but he's pretty little, isn't he?
You can't reach.
Yeah, he's like me on the rides at Alton Towers. Never get on him, too small. So he holds off the fire with Grief and Kara, but unfortunately, IG doesn't, and he's a droid, isn't he? The one thing that this Mandalorian isn't allowed to do as a guild rule is to have his helmet pulled off.
Hey!
Dave, give us what you do when you're at home.
Pulling your helmet off.
Yeah, thanks for that. Appreciate the update. We'll tune in later, Dave, for more exciting things you to get up to at night.
Okay.
So one of his rules is he's not allowed to remove his helmet or, in fact, show his face, which is what happened to me at the local baths when the S fell off my Speedos. I'm not allowed to show my face anymore. Apparently, breaststroke isn't what I thought it was. So he obviously quite a good dynamic in this particular episode because he hates droids, and yet he allows IG-11 to pull off his helmet so he can receive the care he needs. And we get to see...
We already know that IG-11 is a more caring soul at this point.
Yeah.
Well, because of the reprogramming, you see. So, but we have to see Pedro Pascal. To be fair, it might have been somebody else for the last 7 episodes.
He just turned up for this one scene, takes all the glory.
Best job ever. He's like, do you want this job? You only needed for like 10 minutes.
Well, actually, that is true, isn't it? Because they do have 2 other people who play the physical version of the Mandalorian. They have the Kung Fu geezer who does all the fighting stuff, and then they have the cowboy fella who does the pistol shooting thing. So actually, you're not so far off the real truth where you say he was for that scene and probably just stood around leaning next to it, just looking gorgeous.
He spent most of his time recording like we are in a room, all of his lines, and the 2 stunt doubles have been doing the work for the past 7 episodes, and he just turns up, has some buffet, slaps Baby Yoda's hands from touching balls and goes, right, I'll have a Scotch egg, let's crack on with the show. So he gets his helmet pulled right off, and we get to see his face. Hurrah! And then everyone follows the Mandalorian's instructions and gets off down the sewers. Then we find that the guild were all living down below.
Down below, yeah.
After an attack. And the armourer is there and salvaging what has essentially been left. And like everyone else, the armourer wants to see Baby Yoda. Mandalorian explains the situation, and she then gives the backstory and says that Baby Yoda is in fact a foundling and needs to be returned to his people. So she then gives him another bit of his super kick-ass armor, which is the insignia of the Mudhorn. Don't know whether whatever defeats you get on it. So, I mean...
Well, she says she defeated it, and he goes, nah, that's not how it went down. I'd like to claim that, but...
I'd have a cream egg on mine.
Why did you get defeated by a cream egg?
Yeah, all the time.
No, he defeated the cream egg.
But the Mandalorian got battered. It was Baby Yoda that stopped the Mudhorn.
Yeah, no, but he saved Baby Yoda, and so on a technicality, apparently, that still works.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, I'd have a Tesco trolley on mine because I always end up with the one with the wonky wheel. So I would get defeated by a Tesco trolley. So yes, he ends up with the Mudhorn as his signet, and basically he declares himself, interestingly, as a clan of 2, and he also gets what fans have been looking forward to, the really impressive streamlined jetpack that everyone have seen. Obviously, Boba Fett used ridiculously badly in one shot. Boba Fett decides to have it turned on accidentally like a Henry Hoover and end up in the Sarlacc pit. So that worked out well, didn't it? So let's hope Mandalorian uses this jetpack a bit better.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the planet that they were on? Because IG-11 obviously disappears into the lava river, and I know I'm skipping ahead of time, but let's pretend I don't. In season 2, they go back to this same planet where there's lots of lava flowing through the planet. Is this the same planet that Anakin Skywalker in the prequels goes and, when he's fighting with Obi-Wan and ends up in the lava with all his arms and legs burnt off, or is that just a similar thing?
I think it's just a lava flow. The one you're talking about is where, in fact, Darth Vader lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet Star Wars people are shouting at the phone right now. At the 2 marks, tell me why I'm wrong. Come on.
Your Twitter account's going to blow up in it, let's be honest. It's like, that Mr. Pollard guy knows nothing. It is 14 points.
I need to check it to care, though.
Yeah. The one he fights on, that he ends up going, no.
Yeah.
He lives there.
Yeah.
Right.
This just happens to be another lava. But I think I was going to say a palaver.
Boom.
Hey, we're here all week. So Team Mando flees with the stormtroopers after them, but basically the armorer, who's pretty kick-ass, managed just to take a few of them out.
Yeah.
Not for a pie dinner, kill them. No. And then they locate a boat, apparently, which can travel on molten lava. IG-11.
Hang on, you're skipping all over the show. I thought we'd been down the lava place.
No, we're in the lava now.
All right, okay.
You jumped ahead, as you rightly said. Did you literally say something then forget you said it?
No, I just lost where we're at in the episode. I should have really watched it before we had this conversation.
Well, you jumped ahead. I was filling in the bit before that, and now on to the bit where you are. So they get the boat, and as you rightly say, IG-11 sacrifices himself, which wipes out all of the other stormtroopers. They get to just chill out before Mr. Moff Gideon turns up in a massive TIE fighter, which crashes. Don't know what the cost of replacing that is, but it's not going to be good. Grief tries to help, tries to get Baby Yoda's health, and says to him, do the magic hand thing.
I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah. That's the good thing with this. It brings humour to it, doesn't it, really, as well? It's not heavy salad. It's quite well written, the humour. Baby Yoda promptly doesn't.
He just waves his hands.
And we get to see the Mandalorian use his newly found jetpack, attacks Moff Gideon, planting a bomb, which explodes, as I said, and somehow he manages to survive. Grief, we'll kind of fast forward into the bit where Grief has...
Oh, hang on, are we fast forwarding now?
No, yeah.
All I'm doing is picking bullet points because in the interest of time...
Well, I got told off for jumping ahead, and now you're jumping ahead. I just feel it's a bit hypocritical.
Oh, this is the way.
I have spoken.
So Grief asks Cara to become his enforcer, which sets up the fact that I think it's obvious that we're going to see Grief and Cara Dune again, which is great. I don't think they were overused. I think the characters worked well in the whole narrative. Mandalorian jetpacks away with Baby Yoda to take on the mission that he's been given by the armorer, which is to get him back to his people. So we know where that's going to go. But obviously beforehand, he does the honourable thing and he buries Kuil, which is, I thought they would have done that beforehand. His body's probably decomposing now on the desert wasteland.
It's going to be minging by the time you get there, wouldn't it? You'd have all the flies on it and bits that are being pulled off and eaten.
Oh, no.
You get there, there'd be half of him like in front of you and another half of him over there, and no.
Well, no, that's exactly right. It's like I would have buried him straight away instead of you think, well, I've got to go back now. I've got to get this guy back to his people. Oh no, what did you do that thing we're supposed to do? What, put out the bins? No, bury that guy.
I'd have just rolled him in the lava river and left it. I mean, why do more? Yeah, exactly. Why do more work than you need to do?
And then the thing that we find out, obviously, which wraps up this season, is that Moff Gideon is still alive. And not only that, he is wielding the infamous Darksaber.
Yes.
Fans of the cartoon series will know exactly what that means. And fans of Mandalorian people or the Mandalorian people themselves will know what it means. So it leaves it on a cliffhanger, but also for the fans, guaranteed return for season 2.
Yes.
I wasn't massively bothered about Moff Gideon. I couldn't really decide whether he was big enough and bad enough for me. He just kind of felt like the next person up the chain from the last fella that had been killed.
Yeah, he was never going to be a Darth Vader, was he?
No, he felt like he was about 3 rungs down in the pecking order of Darth Vader. And so
he was badass, but
not badass enough.
Yeah. He is noticeably wearing essentially what Darth Vader...
Without a helmet.
Yeah, he's obviously got no helmet.
He's pulled his helmet off.
Yeah.
I mean, he obviously has a bit of Darth Vader envy with his outfit. One of those kids who just sort of buys it. It's close enough to the person they're copying, but not quite as cool, but near enough just for you to go, bit try hard that.
Could be. It's a bit like me with the Baby Yoda. I should have gone for the full one and I bought the cheap one.
Oh my God, you're the Moff Gideon of the real world.
In fairness, Dave, the other one, the low-calorie version one, is not less expensive as such. It is expensive in itself. So don't do yourself down.
Okay.
I mean, you could have gone...
I don't know. For comedic value, I'd much rather
keep it going.
we put him down.
Okay. They put him down, yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, we just go back to the egg.
Yeah, well, there's loads, yeah. There's plenty of things.
Yeah, I mean, the whole show on Dave we can do. Yeah. We've got nothing to do with Mandalorian, just what he gets up to when he's in his underpants. So, I mean, what did we think before we move into Easter egg territory? Because I know you two...
Oh, my God, we'll be here till Christmas with Easter eggs.
No, I preempted it at the beginning by saying I've been very selective with Easter eggs.
Okay. So, Dave, go on. What were your feelings about season 1? By the end of season 1, were you happy? Were you sad? Were you looking forward to season 2? Which things particularly floated your boat? What made you happy? What made you sad?
I don't know. No, I think...
questions do get harder, Dave.
Yeah. No, I just think it gave us all the flavour of what we love about Star Wars. Took us right back. Loads of new characters. But like Mark said about like Cara Dune, you knew they were coming back and you knew they were going to be sort of influential in it. So it just left us wanting more. And again, you know, it had all the classic stuff in there. And then I think when we get on to season 2 next week, I think it got even better.
Yeah, totally.
Would you score it, Dave, out of 10?
I'd give it 9.5 out of 10.
Ooh, strong.
Right up there.
Do you know what? I'm with Dave on this. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it felt cool. It felt real. It was new enough to be interesting, but had enough callbacks for it to feel familiar. The characters were interesting. Even though the episodes weren't particularly long, they felt long. It didn't feel like...
that's what made it good.
Yeah, they didn't feel like they were rushing anything in. They weren't squeezing stuff in. It felt like everything had enough room to breathe. They picked a central story arc. They followed that story arc with little bits of extras sort of dotted in when there was scope to do so. Nothing more complicated than that. I thought season 1 was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. Couldn't have waited any... Well, thankfully, by the time I got to start watching it, season 2 was already available, so I didn't have to wait. I could just crack straight on.
Go into it.
Thank goodness for that. I would go 0.5, because to be honest, Dave, we don't do 0.5 of a score, so you've got to pick a 9 or a 10.
It's got to be 10.
Well, there you go. I'm definitely with Dave, because I would give this a 10 out of 10, because I thought it was amazing. What about you, Latham?
What about Mark?
Well, I was going to give it a 9 out of 10 because I don't do 10s.
Oh, boo. Boo.
Yeah, but well, nothing's ever a 1 unless it's Star Trek Discovery Season 3, and nothing's a 10.
Oh, hang on a minute, Mr. Hypocrisy. What did you say? Nothing's ever a 1. Let me go to your scoring system of Willy's Wonderland where you gave it 0.
That's not a 1 though, is it?
And that's on the premise that I gave Capone 1 with the starting of when I used to do exams, I was told if you spelt your name correctly on the front, you got a mark. So you always start off with a 1, and you gave it a 0.
Yeah, because I tuned in to watch a film with Nicolas Cage, who doesn't say a single word in 88 minutes of a film I tuned in to watch. So he got 0 because he's the star quality and he says nothing.
I know, but what?
I may as well watch Charlie Chaplin.
So you don't give it a 10?
I'm not giving it to qualify this, which is basically, if you give it a 10, what if next season's better? What are you going to do? Give it 11 out of 10? You can't, can you?
No, you just give it 10 because it's equally as perfect.
Just 10 and 10.
It might not be. It might be better than the 10. It might be 10.1, in which case if you rounded it down, it's still 10. But it might be 10.6, in which case it's 11. We didn't do 11 out of 10. Whereas I can go, well, it's a 10. And you can go, oh, I wish I didn't give it a 10.
But what happens if you've given this at 9? Season 2's better, so you give it a 10, and then season 3's better than season 2, yeah? That bollocks you up, doesn't it? Because you're back in our boat again. We've just gone early with our 10s, haven't we, Dave?
We just loved it.
You're both you're both premature scorers. I mean, without inventing the future, we haven't seen season 2 yet, have we?
Yes. Sorry, you can peek behind the curtain, though.
So season 2 might be a 9 for me, which means if season 3 is better, I give it a 10, and if not, I'll give it another 9. That's how I'm going to go.
So precise.
But the reason why I've given it a 9 is because I think single-handedly this show is a love letter to the fans. It doesn't try to be political. It doesn't try to be woke. It isn't trying to shoehorn thought to tell me how to think. It has enough to keep me interested as a fan. It appeals to someone who isn't an ardent fan of Star Wars and enjoys single stories about sci-fi. The characters aren't overpopulated with backstory. It isn't top heavy with shoehorning in people who are supposed to know who they are. You can watch it as a fan and not a fan and be quite confident that we may revisit it if the story needs it. We don't suddenly find ourselves going, oh, by the way, there's such and such. So that's why I've given it a 9. And yeah, I loved it. Loved the show. I loved the theme tune. I loved the writing, the character development, the depth of the characters, believing you were there. It drew you in. All of it was all good, and obviously the little nods to what exists, whether you've watched the Clone Wars or you've seen the films or anything like that, and little nuances that you can tell it was made by fans for fans. So there you go.
What about Easter eggs then? Bearing in mind we're 2 hours in.
I've kept it concise, and I will wheel through these very quickly if I can. So Life Day fans, or not fans of Star Wars Holiday Special, celebrates Life Day, which is kind of what Wookiees celebrate on Kashyyyk. We get that mentioned in episode 1 when he has his pulse rifle, which is, again, a little bit of a nod to the holiday special because that was canon. So we see his pulse rifle. It hadn't been seen before, but he was obviously introduced there. The Camtono, which is a franchise that has grown throughout the films. And we get the backstories in the episode The Sin, and he gets the payments. And that's the container. It's called the Camtono, but basically the container is the ice cream maker.
Yeah.
Now, the important thing about this is, as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't canon. It was basically a throwaway scene in Cloud City in The Empire Strikes Back, and they've thrown it in, and they made an actual figurine of the guy running through the corridor for his 2 seconds of fame, and that's what they've made. They've brought that in, so it's now canon. We see when Amy Sedaris' character is fixing the Razor Crest, we see the pit droids, which if anyone who's seen the prequels will know they're from the pod racing, and they're the ones that George Lucas came up with as a comedic slapstick character for those prequels in Mos Eisley. And then, as I think I've already mentioned, we see the cantina in Mos Eisley, which has changed since the films and now is run by droids, not humans. So that was quite a little thing. In the episode The Prisoner, Anakin Clone Wars voice is heard, which is, again, a kind of throwback to the Clone Wars animated series. And they brought in the actor Matt Lanter, who played him and did the voice work for that. So that was good. But obviously fans would have been, I don't know whether you've seen the Clone Wars series.
No, I haven't seen that.
There's a lot, you're going to find a lot of callbacks to those because they're trying to bring all of it back in, because what happened is when Disney decided to decide what was canon, what wasn't, there was a lot of things that were outside of canon. So now what they're bringing in is things that they deem to be canon, and that's what they've done here. The same, in fact, with the Imperial Transporter, probably one of the most random Easter eggs that any fan will realize, because in fact, it doesn't exist other than we see the Death Troopers in Rogue One in one of them. But it was also, as a child in 1979, it was in fact a toy you could buy. I think they tried it in the Rebels animated series, but it's the toy from the 70s, brought it back in. So fair play to them. Cara Dune of Alderaan, which was destroyed by the Empire. You know her backstories because of that fact. A little bit of Star Wars New Hope thrown in. And then last but not least, as I say, there was probably loads, but in the interest of time, pick ones that a lot of people would have probably been aware of. The Darksaber, Moff Gideon has that. And anyone who's watched the Clone Wars or Rebels would be aware of the Darksaber and its importance within canon.
Very good.
Well,
there we go. Lots and lots and lots of Easter eggs. Hopefully you've enjoyed that, guys. That's a whistle-stop tour of Season 1. As I say, we're going to do another of these shows to cover a whistle-stop tour of Season 2. And then when Season 3 comes out, we'll do an episode by episode so that we can really drag and squeeze every last drop of it out. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you have, great. Let us know. Vote. Give us a 5-star review on the platform you're using to listen to it. Get in contact with us on the socials, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. It's at The Two Marks. Let us know what your thoughts are, if we've got anything wrong. If you just want to tell us that you particularly like a character that we've just dissed, then yeah, let us know. It's all good. If you're a pizza franchise and you would like to sponsor us, The Two Marks at thepodstation.co.uk. We'll take anyone's money. It's all good. Dave, thank you very much for joining us. You'll be joining us for season 2, so look forward to that. And Mr. Latham, thank you for all your hard work. Thank God you were here.
Thank you all, and thank you to the listeners.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Mum. Without further ado, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll catch you next time. See you later.
See you guys. This is the way.
Get social at The Two Marks on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Also check them out on YouTube.